afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to this week's SCIPLE show. And in this episode, we are talking with Rose Reiter, and she is going to be talking to us and sharing her story and also sharing her thoughts on how our time is now, which is such an interesting topic. So I'm really excited to dive into this. I'm going to give people a chance to just jump on, get in on the conversation. And so we're just going to take a moment, and I'm actually just going to jump into the Facebook group so we can share this over with all of our other SCIPLE sisters. And just give me a second here. So if you're taking your afternoon break, or maybe you're taking a later lunch, feel free, join us, grab a beverage, bring your lunch, join us for this conversation. And all right, so let's see here. It is a beautiful day here in St. John, New Brunswick, and I'm loving this beautiful spring weather. It's been a long winter, that's for sure. So it's always nice to have some good, nice sunshine. All right, so we're going to share this over into the group, girls. Bear with me. All right. And voila. Gotta love technology.
Especially when it works, right?
Exactly. All right, so we have Rose here today, and she's a very dynamic person, and I love everything that she's doing. She does a couple of different things, and she's going to share with us basically how you can do what you love doing and do more than just one thing, because she does this really, really well. So Rose is, she has two companies, and so she is a composer and writer with music, and she also has a consulting management company where she produces workshops. So Rose is also known as Leonty. So if you've heard that name, this is the girl. And so we're going to dive in a little bit about who she is, what she does, a little bit about her story, because I know she has a really, really powerful one, and how it's led her to now and what she's doing in the world and how she's really living her purpose. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation with her and to be doing it live and sharing it with all you girls. So without further ado, let's bring on Rose. Thank you so much, Rose, for joining us today.
Thank you, Whitley, for having me. And hi to all the SCIPLE sisterhood out there. Hope everybody's having a great day. I hope you've got your beverage, as I do. And it is lovely weather here too, Whitley. I'm in a beautiful little town called Mount Tabor, New Jersey today. And spring has just blossomed, so I couldn't resist. I needed to go outside for our conversation. And Whitley, I always love conversing with you, and I just thought, oh, what a great chance to actually share with the world a typical conversation between Whitley and Rose.
I love it.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us. I see some people are jumping on. Naomi, I think that's how you say your name, Naomi, and Robin. Hi, Robin. Oh, we've got some people joining us. So, Rose, let's dive into this, because I know that we've got about a half an hour. Okay. And so let's, why don't you share a little bit about your journey, where you've been, and kind of paint a little bit of a picture for us.
Absolutely. So Whitley, I didn't realize it was not very normal. For me, it was a normal life, but I was raised by a soldier from World War II. He was 50 years older than I was, and he was a paratrooper, and he survived incredible adventures in life. And he somehow escaped Siberia 10 years after the war ended, and only to face the greatest battle of his life, which was to start a new life. And you can imagine a young man by the age of 27 coming into a world which is in peacetime, having to learn a new language and move to a different country and start all over again. And he had to do this about 3 or 4 times in his life until he had me. And it's an incredible journey that we're actually, I do speak on. It's called Fairy Tales of a Soldier's Daughter, and these are the tales that I was raised with. But one thing my father was trying to, I think, teach me was resiliency and the ability to retain our humanity in the face of trauma, and to go beyond trauma and to transcend it and transform it. And so I really spent a majority of my life doing that, because as those of you know about PTSD, it's actually something that it doesn't end with war. The war comes with you, and it impacts your entire family. So we had our challenges, but again, great love between us. And it's been 10 years since he's passed, and in the last 10 years, I've worked on developing my business and my career to be in line with a lot of the things I had to transcend and move forward with. Not to say I'm done. I mean, we're all, I think, on a journey. So yeah, one of the things I've always been focused on is time management and time. And in the music that I do, time is a bit of an important thing, keeping time and so forth. So time has always been a fascinating topic for me. And heads up, I will be speaking at the Power of the Purse in June the 14th. And this is all about time, the fact that our time is now. And if not now, then when, right? So
Right.
my backstory kind of led me to a natural desire to share things that I've learned and things that I'm still learning, and practical things. I'm far too, there's Austrian in my blood, so I'm far too practical to not to try to apply a lot of these lessons to life. I was one of the lucky ones to be able to get to this point, though, and I think those of you who've been through trauma would understand that. So my mission is quality life with the time that they think they have.
I love that, Rose. So, I mean, obviously, growing up, there's been those challenges that came along with like finding yourself and just going through life. Are you able to share some of those challenges that you experienced and how you overcame them?
Oh, absolutely. I think the one that I actually still really find the most challenging is how the cascade of war can cascade into everyday violence and brutality in between us humans. And so how do we retain our humanity in the midst of all these things that are put in front of us? So violence for me was a everyday thing. I was the kid that hid in the closet and pretended she had a spaceship and was like traveling the world to avoid the violence. I had a good imagination. I was very grateful for that. Music for me was my way of expressing, as was writing. So art became a way for me to express and to be able to channel some of that energy out. But I also took on kickboxing, and I still do. And I still have my Brooklyn edge with me some days. So, I've become a lot more cognizant of what it is. So I think in terms of how I overcame it was, number one, becoming aware that it was there and acknowledging it was there. And the time I remember the most was I was walking with a really dear friend of mine down the street. I was about 28, 29 years old. And we were starting to get into a play fight and just kind of tickling each other, having fun. And all of a sudden, I just went wham, completely hit him. It was hard. And this is like a strong man, and I hurt him. And he was like, "Ow!" And I realized I just started to cry. I realized in that moment that I hadn't let go of that. I hadn't yet figured out a way to get rid of that. And from that moment on, I vowed I would never hit another human being. And even with my father and I, we tried to end that cycle of violence. We really did our best together. And I have this funny snap. To me, it's funny, but I have this snapshot of when I was about to move out. Must have been 16, 17 years old. And my dad was elderly. He was over 50 years older than me, right? So he was, hitting 70. And this was an interesting power dynamic, because there he was with his fists up, and there I was with my fists up. And we were in the snapshot of who's going to hit first, because we realized we're oh no, we don't know how to deal with this. And we didn't hit, I don't think we hit each other that day. But we love boxing too, right? So it's weird, being a girl, being a woman. And that's another element, actually, is being a woman, being raised by a man who was trained as a soldier. And he was, by the way, a child soldier. He's one of the children who were forced into the war against his will and
Wow.
against his family's will. So it's not like he chose to go there. And millions of people went through that. So I am sharing some of their stories too. But when you live in Canada and you have a roof over your head and for the most part food in your fridge, that's a pretty big deal in our family. The ability to have that. And I think how do we overcome it? I think music and art was a very big thing. In fact, can I share this tiny story, Whitley?
Absolutely, Rose.
It still surprises me. My father was in the Siberian death camps for many years. He'd escaped once, and then he got recaptured. Now, the second time he got captured, he thought, that's it, life's over, I'm done. He's not going to get out again. So he decided to use his artistic skills in the camps a soldier figured out that he could do portraits. He was an amazing portraiture, right? So, portrait artist. So he started getting extra bread every day for the portraits he drew. And one day he was hiding some of his bread. He had a little storage area so he could, store his bread. And it was behind the soldier's latrine, and he was hiding the bread underneath the latrine. And this soldier started coming at him, and it was unexpected. He did not think a soldier was going to be anywhere near there. And so he started crouching down, and he was as tight to the ground as he could. And he's always said to me, Rosie, I just crouched down and I went as far back as I could. And next thing I knew, I was half a mile outside of the camp. So
Wow.
the fact that he even used his art and somehow that actually survived. And it's interesting, as an old man, he was blind and deaf, and he was still painting as an artist, old. And I think that was his final thing. So I want to encourage women out there, and people out there that are listening. Art is not, you don't have to be a professional and a famous person, to do art. Art is something we can tap into at all times. And it is a way for us to survive the funniest and then the craziest circumstances of life, but also to transform some of that trauma out. And I don't care what kind of art it is. I don't care, for some people, building a swing set is a project, something they can do. Like, so staying busy and I think going back to your initial introduction, Whitley, it's one of the reasons I love to stay busy is I enjoy, like, in my world, I actually almost died once. And when I came back, I realized even more so how short and valuable life was. And because of my own health things as well, that was another element. I realized time is so precious. And not like I didn't know that, but until I think you have that, when you lose people, like I've lost a few friends over the last few years. I know a lot of women out there everybody has lost somebody close to them. And I think as we get a little older, we start to recognize the value. But the problem there is, I think, especially for those of us over 30, I think sometimes we start to think, oh, my life is over. There's no way I could do anything now. I'm stuck in my life. No, you're not. My dad started his life when he was 27. I've restarted my life at 30 and again at 40. So it's like, it's possible to have success and to have the quality of life and the fulfillment of life you want. And it's no use waiting for the perfect time. Even if you just microtask something and do something small towards that thing that you want to do. So I go on. I talk with my hands.
Well, I have a question actually in terms of perfection. So, and I know you talked about this, don't get so caught up over perfection, but rather being exceptional. And I think that that's something that a lot of us, we struggle with, is sometimes we procrastinate because we are perfecting things. We're trying to perfect something before even putting it out into the world. I know I've been guilty for that too. I'm planning, trying to make something so perfect because I want it to be perfect before I share it with other people. And often that's just, kind of set me back. So what would be a piece of advice that you could give to other people to get past that, or to improve?
That's a great question, because it's actually a topic that I work with across Canada. So I do these workshops across Canada that deal with some of these issues in a very practical way, and trying to help people make better days and make choices that move them forward in life. And so I've developed something called the scale of perfection. Now, I do think perfection has a place. If you're going to build me a bridge or an airplane, please do the math perfectly, okay? It's a health and safety issue. Do the math right, okay? So I think there is a place for perfection in life. But I don't think it's in our every day. If I'm going to go and make a cup of tea, does the water really need to be at 120 degrees, Celsius for it to be a good cup of tea? And I think sometimes you're right. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I was raised to be high performing, and that's another reason I love doing what I do. But when you look at a scale of perfection, and let's assume perfection is reserved for health and safety matters, or for things that really require like 99.9% Six Sigma, like absolute best effort possible so people don't die. I get that. But below that, the funny thing is perfection. If you were to look at my chart, I'm happy to actually send it to you for as part of this show. You can so everybody else can see it after the show. But if you look at perfection, there's a direct correlate. Where's my fingers? I can't see if my fingers are in. So there's a direct correlate between perfection and non-action. So if non-action is at the bottom of the scale, it goes up from there to perfection. Okay, so we've got non-action, we got fair, we got good enough, we got excellent, we've got exceptional, and then we got perfect. Okay, so just imagine a scale. There is a correlate between thinking like a perfectionist and getting nothing done, or thinking like a perfectionist and then rushing at the very, very, very last minute and getting a poor job done. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a direct correlate between those two in 80%, 90% of what it is we do every single day. Now, or getting started on a project or continuing the momentum on a project. So, or rescoping our schedule, something has impacted our schedule. What do we do now, right? Especially as busy women, busy entrepreneurs and so forth. So what we try to coach people to do is to ask themselves, if you thought of perfection as 100% and you thought of exceptional as like a 90%, maybe between 90 and 95. And if you thought as excellent as like 85 to 90, if you have to, bring it down to numbers for yourself and say, okay, you know, will we have an okay day if this cup of tea is good enough? Is it a good enough tea? Now, if I'm a tea connoisseur, Whitley,
Yeah.
I may require it to be an excellent. I am Canadian, so I might require it to be excellent. Excuse me. So when I go into something, I try to set up what we call expectation management. We try to look at our to-do list from that perspective of how good does it need to be good enough? Does it need to be excellent? Does it need to be exceptional? And if I'm going to shoot for exceptional, then I'm going to show up for exceptional. But
Mm-hmm.
you will notice that even to get exceptional, you normally have to iterate several cycles before you get to exceptional. Have you ever tried writing a beautiful paragraph for an email that is like so important? It's not going to come out on your first draft. Your first draft might be fair. Your second draft might be good enough. And hopefully between the third and the sixth draft, you're going to start to get into excellent and exceptional. It's the same with life. You know, if you're learning how to do something new, it's not going to be great the first time. So we have to allow ourselves. And I know other people say, well, allow yourself to fail. I do believe in that. I think there's a lot of lessons out of failure. And I think if we don't accept the fact that occasionally we're not going to win, that's part of life. We have to learn from that. But I also think we need to coach ourselves to aspire to the level of excellence that will make us happy in whatever arena of life it is that we're trying to achieve. So training, let's say I'm injured. I'm actually currently injured. I have a meniscus tear on my right knee. And I get really hard on myself with my training because all of a sudden now I'm like, I can't do my 10 miles. I can only do 2 miles. Well, why don't I switch that around and say, look, am I giving it the best effort today that I can with the energy that I have today to do this? Yes, I am. Am I showing up? Yes, I am. You know what? That's actually good enough for today. Or maybe it's excellent for today. So really reframing that definition for ourselves and coaching ourselves. And another thing I do, Whitley, for myself and it's helped a lot of people, is I use the concept of showing up and microtasking. And I wish I was standing, I could show you this, but just imagine you've got this chair that you've got to get some work done, your laptop and your chair's there, and you keep, the first time you walk by, you're like, I just got to get me a cup of tea, right? And okay, fine. The second time you walk by, you're like, oh, there's a really good Netflix show on.
I really should be folding that laundry there.
Yeah. Oh, I got to clean the house. That was my big thing. Like, look at how you actually procrastinate. Look at the actual physical nature of your procrastination. What do you do? If you had to teach a course in procrastination, how would you teach us to become good procrastinators, right? So you start to identify that and lighten up a little bit. It doesn't have to always be so serious, right? It's like, okay, fine. I've walked past my chair 3 times. So what you can learn to do is microtask things. And a microtask is something as simple as, let's say I have a report or an email I need to get out. Something as simple as opening up the document and saving the file and then walking away from it. You've still achieved a tiny portion of that task. And most of the time, that's the mental game. The mental game is actually getting started. You'll notice like 2 minutes to 10 minutes of any task. It's hard sometimes to get to the task, right? But once you put in a little bit of energy and you start to break it down into something achievable. And I'm sure many people have heard this in many different ways, but I hope this resonates with the women listening today. If you've got like a heavy schedule or you've got a dream that you're trying to accomplish, allow it to chunk it down into the smallest possible task that is not overwhelming for you. It's something that's achievable for you, and
Mhm.
work on that first. Don't expect it's all going to come overnight. And I mean, I have several cases. We won an international award for Canada a couple years ago. The Twilight film, there's a prequel to the Twilight film series, which I scored. And you know how many years it took me to, move across the country, build a studio, get a portfolio enough to get the attention of these directors, and then, actually get the call, and then realize, oh my God, I have 3 weeks to score this film in. Uh-oh. you know, and to realize that it took all those little tasks to get to that point. And so if I had just set out, launched Leonty Music and said, hey, I should be like, I should be on top like right now, overnight. Well,
Mhm.
that can set us back. That can demotivate us. Let's just eat one little bite at a time. So.
Oh my goodness, it's so true, Rose. So true. It's and I think that a lot of people, especially people who are starting out, they feel like, oh, I like they'll follow other people, or they're watching other people or others that they look up to, and they think that they have to be this overnight success, or they have to be so far. But I think what we often forget is that all of these people who have made it thus far in their career, they had to do the same thing that we're all doing. Is like they had to take day by day to work up to that, which is such a big thing, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of people to understand. And you're right, it could be a big demotivator.
It can. Okay, another example, like today I'm working on a really heavy deadline, and it
Mhm.
is like a really monstrosity mountain, beautiful dream deadline that I've always wished for, and it's here in front of me. It's today actually, which is super cool. But there I am working on it. It's like, okay, I got to get ready for Whitley's conversation. Great. And so I grabbed my shower, and I was like, okay, and I got my face on, and in my world, perfect and highly exceptional for an interview is I've dried my hair and I've curled it, or I've at least made it look like really swank, right? But I realized, today I had to make a decision. I have long hair, okay? You know how long it takes to dry this stuff? um, and I was like, really, what matters in our interview? It matters that I show up. It matters that I just try to share what I can in the time we have. And it does matter that I have a little bit of face on. So, okay, that we'll do makeup, So that's an example, like a real world example of it's okay to be human, ladies.
Mhm.
It's okay to be human. We are always, I think, having to aspire to this magazine ideal of what it's like to be a woman today. And I'm not saying that we can't do that occasionally either. I say we go for that when we can, but to give ourselves a little bit of a break once in a while. And it's not about getting everything done. It's about getting the right things done in our life.
I love that.
So what matters? What matters to me is my conversation with you, Whitley. I don't care if my hair's not curly
I love
today.
it.
And if I didn't know you, and if this was, if this is in front of like 50 million people, well, then I probably would have not booked a morning of work. So, right? It's the two of us having a great chat with a cup of tea. So,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, in fact, for me, because I know you, Whitley, it just is so much more relaxing for me. So I knew, oh, she'll forgive me. It's okay. But it's funny how something that little can actually eat at us in a day, or can,
It's
right? Have you ever
so
had a conversation, Whitley, where you say something and you're like, I said what? Why did I say that? Really? And it's just like, really?
yeah. Well, and going back to the whole microtasking and
Mm-hmm.
ticking things off of your list, just as small as it is just saving a file. When I took your productivity and performance workshop, Rose, which was amazing, it was such an eye opener
Thank
for
you.
me. Since then, I actually really adapted. And I think one of the biggest things that I took away from that was slowing down on the whole like multitasking and focusing on one thing at a time and having them timed and then taking small, short breaks. And I'm telling you, like when I can do that, when I'm super clear on what it is that I'm trying to achieve and I set a time limit for myself and they're shorter time limits and then I take a break after that, I find that I'm sticking to it and my productivity goes way up here and I'm a lot more efficient and my thinking is clear. Like I'm able to actually get more out of it.
And there's a lot of science behind that, Whitley. I think we're trained sometimes just to have marathon sessions, and there's actually something called an ultradian rhythm. If you're used to the concept of a circadian rhythm, we have something called an ultradian rhythm when it comes to productivity. So basically 90 to 120 minutes is our energy bell curve, no matter what it is we're doing, physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional energy. And when you hit that curve, you're really not using your time as efficiently. So I've developed a technique called counterbalancing, where we look at our to-do list and we're able to say, okay, what are my non-negotiables for the day? Now, I don't want 10 non-negotiables on a list. I could do 2 non-negotiables, maybe 3 in a day, like the ones I will defend from everything else. So I call that my top 2 to do. And then between that, I look at my secondary energy output, my secondary items on the to-do list. And I'm like, all right, hey, I'm going to work with Whitley for a bit. I want to focus on this 100%. I don't want to be thinking about a million other things. And focus on 1, get it done. 2, as you said, to whatever time where your productivity saturation point is, and then move into another task. And it could be washing the dishes. It can be cleaning up the house. So we start to feel better momentum and better energy. And advice for everybody out there is think about it as managing your energy, not your time. And if you're interested, there's a great book by Tony Schwartz and Catherine McCarthy called exactly that, Managing Your Energy, Not Your Time. And this is research that's been tested in Fortune 500 companies. So, if they've tested it and it works for them, it can work for everybody. And you're right, productivity will go up big time. So, and in terms of, creative work that I do, it's the same thing. People are like, well, creative work, you can't put a Gantt chart together for that. You can't put a project plan together for that. You'd be surprised. You can actually show up and get stuff done. But yeah, no matter what it is, I think asking yourself when you're 90, when you're 100 years old, you look back at your life, are you really getting the right things done for you? Like, is this what you want for your life? Because we get, I think, so caught up in our everyday details in our everyday world that we forget to look at the big picture. We forget to look at the steps that we are taking. They're heading us somewhere. If you think of your life as the arrow and bow, and if you're to shift your life by 0.005 of a degree, where will that end you up? And I think it's important to take a breather every day and kind of take a 2-minute breath and go, okay, am I doing the things, long game? Is this towards my long game or not? And if it's not, then, maybe I can shift it just a little bit to just shift my arrow just a bit more. So, yeah, because what we do every day matters. How we do everything in our life actually, I believe, can show how we do anything in our life can relate to how we do everything in our life. So, if we're constantly going after this gold ring, this unachievable gold ring, and we start getting demotivated and depressed and stuff, well, that's just going to cycle more, as we all know. So get your little things done. Get little things done. They actually do matter, but just make sure they're still in line with your big vision of who you are and what you want. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There was a quote by Tony Robbins, and he said,
Yeah.
We overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years.
Yes.
It's good.
That's good. Have you ever had the experience, Whitley, where you have this great idea and you're like, oh, this would be a great idea to do, right?
Oh yeah.
Maybe. But as you start to head into it, and we start planning a schedule, which is called a predictive schedule, we start predicting our time as if this idea will just require sustained energy all the way to get to the end of it. But then life happens and all of a sudden we dip and our effort goes down. Let's say here, I'm looking here. Okay, there's my little dot. There's my deadline or there's my goal, right?
Yeah.
Here's my energy at the beginning. My energy starts to drop over a couple weeks and all of a sudden, oh boy, there's Netflix right about there. And then there's my goal and there's my effort curve right next to the goal deadline. It's a common thing we all do. So when we're scheduling our life, we often think, okay, there's our goal. I'm just going to just achieve it. We just go A to B. But that's not how life works. Life impacts us with stuff. So what I recommend is we start to get a bit more strategic. And for those of you online here, because I know we only got a couple minutes, just use a rolling wave. Just imagine this concept of, okay, today I'm going to put in a half hour. Tomorrow I'll put in an hour. The next day I'll just put in 20 minutes. Maybe I'll put in 4 hours the next day. So you can start predicting your energy and your effort just a bit better, so you actually start sustaining the fuel required to achieve that goal. And that's why Tony Robbins' quote is correct, because once you become strategic as to how you're going to work your day and work your time towards what it is that matters for you, you're actually going to end up having more energy you won't get as burnt out. And I'm
Right.
not saying that you don't have marathon days. I have marathon days. I have high performance days, but I also make sure to schedule, and this might sound like a big deal, but I schedule down cycle days. And for those women out there that have not taken a vacation in years, I was one of those women. 2012 was my very first vacation of my entire life. Once you get to that bottom, once you start getting burnt out, you're not gonna be it's not as easy to get up again. So
Mhm.
every week, where's your down cycle? For me, Friday nights are non-negotiable. Nobody gets those. Those are for me. I get to do whatever I want with those. So just a couple little practical tips to try to help those of us who are overwhelmed with time and time management. And your time is now. So if you don't start now, then when are you? And there is no better time than now. Even if you're just doing micro tasks along the way, just start now. Get it started. And feel free to connect with me, of course, if you have questions. But are we taking questions on this session too, Whitley, or is it?
Yeah, so basically, if anyone has any questions at all at this point, please feel free to drop them in the comments. If you're catching the replay, drop the questions in the comments anyways. I am going to post up Rose's contact information, her social media links as well, so that if you want to reach out to her, if you have questions that you want to send to her directly, you'll be able to do so. Rose, before we log off here, I just wanted to ask if you could share a little bit more about what you do with the productivity and performance workshops that you put on.
Absolutely. So basically a little bit of what we talked about today. I've given away a couple of the
Yeah.
awesome little bits that were very easy to implement. Basically, we look at the typical day of a modern professional and all the arenas of life that we are responsible for, and how is it that we actually just get stuff done, and not just get stuff done, but get the right stuff done.
Right.
So the workshops are held all across Canada. I usually have people who represent me, and we actually schedule these workshops across the nation. And I'm also project management certified. And as you guys know, like I also do creative project management. And as a composer and a producer, we run a lot of projects. We, as in my companies. So yeah, my little firm, I just facilitate teams. I make sure that they are having healthy team ecosystems, and a lot of that is related to time management. But time management also includes communication and how you say no. It's like when somebody comes in and goes, "Hey, can we do this?" It's like I teach something called assess before yes. And so I take people through a process that we're never taught. Nobody taught us how to say no. I mean, maybe we learned along the way, but how do we assess before saying yes to something on our schedule, whether it's us requesting it of ourselves or other people requesting it of us? So I take you through processes, tips, practical tips. There's always materials and yada yada. So it's actually quite fun. I actually enjoy. I love doing them, but it's one of my life purposes. It's one of my ikigais. Ikigai is a Japanese word for purpose, and I found a lot of purpose in seeing how their eyes light up when they realize, "This is my time. Yeah, this is your time. You get to do with your time what you like, no matter what you think your the culture or the job or the boss or any of those things try to get in. It's still your time. It's your time zone. Nobody else's time but yours." So once you get that, like once you really internalize that concept of I I own my time. Yeah, think of it as your own time zone.
Right. Right.
And it's I got a Rose time zone, and that Rose time zone needs to happen. And for those mothers out there, for example, they're like, yeah, but my children come first. Well, yes, but ever notice the airline safety procedure? They always say put your oxygen on your face first before you can help a child. And it sounds weird, but it's true. If we don't oxygenate our lives, if we don't have energy, how are we supposed to have the capacity to help everybody else around her? And trust me, I know. I took care of an elderly father for many years, so I get it. And I was going to university, and I was running a job and a music business. So trust me, it is a lot of work, and I get that. And my heart goes out to all the women out there that are currently overwhelmed and suffering. And I want to say, you don't have to suffer. You do not have to suffer. The power in your now moment, and Whitley, I know we have to go soon, so I'm gonna a couple things here, but the power in your now moment, the now that you have right now, is more powerful than the sum of all of your past moments put together. I'm trying to look in the camera. If you get this now, this is so important. This is why I'm alive, okay? This is why I'm trying to get this message across to people. Your now matters. And there's only 3 things that I do know about my life. First thing, I was born. Second thing, I am here now. By whatever fate and whatever luck and however it all happened, I'm here now. I'm still here. And the third thing I know is that one day I likely have an expiration date. I'm not going to be here now anymore. So what I do between my now and the rest of my life actually does matter. And if nobody else, then it sure as heck matters to me. And I want you to know it actually does matter to the people in your life. When you are happy, when you are engaged, when you have a life that is fulfilling to you, it expands to everybody around you. So never forget the power of how your time zone matters, not just to you, but to everybody around you. Okay, I'm off my high horse now. I'm going to sit down now.
No, it's amazing, Rose. Thank you so, so much for sharing that. It's so powerful, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget, girls, anyone who is in the St. John, New Brunswick area, Power of the Purse is coming up. It is June 14th, and it is happening in St. John, New Brunswick. I will be posting up the event. It should be all over social media here soon anyways, but Rose will be there speaking on how your time is now. So that is that's wonderful, Rose. Thank you so very much for joining us today and sharing.
Thank you.
It was really nice.
Oh, well, thank you for having me and letting me go on and talk with my hands.
All right, Rose.
See you out there. Thank you, Whitley.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today and watching. For anyone who enjoyed this episode, pop a thumbs up in the comments below and join us next week for next week's SCIPLE show. And we'll see you then. Bye for now.